Hi, I'm Dr. Brittany Schaefer, consulting psychologist for the Department of State Hospitals Conditional Release Program, representing the department and chair of this housing committee meeting. Before we begin, for those attending in Sacramento, I'd like to point out that the restrooms and water fountains are located in the lobby to the left of the elevators, should anyone need them. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Mark Graybow, Chief Psychologist of the Department of State Hospitals Conditional Release Program, to provide introductory.
Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Hello and welcome. The purpose of today's meeting is to hold a housing committee meeting pursuant to Welfare and Institutions Code Section 6608.5, Subdivision D2. To receive relevant assistance and consultation from our county partners to inform recommendations to the Superior Court of Placer County on the placement of an individual committed to the Department of State Hospitals pursuant to the Federally Violent Predator Act. The individual has been found by the court to no longer be a danger to the health and safety of others, and that it is not likely that the person will engage in sexually violent criminal behavior due to the person's diagnosed mental disorder under supervision and treatment in the community. As such, the court has already approved placement of the individual into the conditional release program. Please remember, the court has already determined that the individual is ready for conditional release into the community in Placer County. The sole purpose of today's housing committee meeting is to discuss potential placement options. Once a Conrad placement location is provided to the court, the Department of State Hospitals will provide notice to the listed parties in Welfare and Institutions Code Section 6609.1, at least 30 days prior to the date the court is designated to consider the recommended or proposed placement. No placement in Conrad will occur until the court orders such a placement. The Housing Committee meeting, scheduled from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., will proceed as follows. The meeting will be called to order and roll will be taken. The Housing Committee members will move into closed session. Please note, for those attending in Placer County, the Housing Committee members will excuse themselves and retreat to a conference room for closed session while in Sacramento. The Housing Committee members will remain in the conference room, and the public will be excused during the closed portion of the meeting. The Housing Committee members will return to open session and report on any closed session actions. Attendees will be invited to provide public comment. 2 minutes are currently allotted for each speaker. The timeframes may be adjusted in order to hear as many comments from the public as possible. The chair will provide the next steps, and the meeting will then be adjourned. We'll now proceed with the first item on the agenda. Dr. Schaefer?
We are now calling this meeting to order and will take the roll of the Housing Committee. After I announce the entity for which you are the designee, please state your name. If you have support staff present, please introduce them and state what agency or department they're from as well. Dr. Brittany Schaefer, representing the Department of State Hospitals. Housing Committee member or meeting designees representing for the District Attorney.
Timothy Works for the Placer County District Attorney's Office.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your name?
Timothy Works.
Thank you. County Counsel.
Julia Reeves for Placer County Council.
The client's attorney.
Brad Walcott from the Public Defender's Office for Mr. Stevenson.
Law enforcement.
Tyler Neer, Placer County Sheriff.
Thank you. Noting for the record that several Department of State Hospital staff are present not as members of the Housing Committee meeting, but to provide support to the committee and take notes. Thank you for your attendance. As outlined in our agenda, we will next go into agenda item number 2, closed session.
Dr.
Pursuant to
Schaefer,
the, yes,
Timothy Wirtz from Placer County District Attorney's Office. I request that we conduct our meeting in open session.
I'm sorry, but we are gonna proceed to closed session.
Is it possible that we could take public comment prior to the closed session so that the public's comments can inform our meeting?
No, I'm sorry, we're gonna keep to the agenda at hand and have, public comment after the closed session. Thank you for your attendance. As outlined in our agenda, we will next go into agenda item number 2, closed session, pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, subdivision C4. Please keep in mind that as soon as closed session is complete, the open session with public comment will begin. We recommend you stay in close proximity to hear the notice. At this time, so that we may facilitate the closed session portion of the agenda, we will ask all members of the public attending in Sacramento to leave the room. Only the Housing Committee members, Liberty Healthcare, and DSH support staff may remain in the meeting room. We invite our public attendees in Sacramento to wait in the lobby until the closed session ends and we move back into open session.
So you see the group and STR placements, really good time for the last services.
Are we going to do the closed session?
Their closed session,
Yeah,
they're gonna
just
push to where the public are gonna stay in the
Just
room.
highlighting,
They're gonna do closed session meeting. That
Closed
is already
session.
set up.
Closed session is for the purpose of finding a suitable location.
Correct, to consult and to, yeah,
Sexually violent,
yes.
and you're not gonna take
Our
public
older
comment.
kids, we are the picture.
Okay, so you won't make a decision.
Supervised.
There's not gonna be a decision made.
Placement or
Sure.
So they are most likely probably living on their own, just still under the working with the child welfare agency, so. And just. But the other ones, I bring some.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you all so very much for giving up your time, your energy, everything that it took to get here today. We were told that these meetings typically don't have much presence here, and it is absolutely inspiring to see you all here today. Thank you to our elected officials and all of you. My name is Morgan Geyer, and I'm the District Attorney for Placer County. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to give just a little bit of background. As you heard up there, there's been a long procedural history with this case. I wanted to sort of set the stage so that you understood how we got here, why we're here, and what we can expect to happen here today. This is not part of the official meeting. This is just me sort of riffing up here to help you guys understand sort of what we've been doing. For other questions about the history, please see our website and our social media. We've tried to engage with all of you. And I will reiterate going forward today, we still, after today, have a court hearing on September 1st where a judge ultimately makes a decision. As part of that decision, we will be filing a packet of information on behalf of the District Attorney's Office and really on behalf of the people of Placer County. If you would like your voice to be heard, and we encourage you to do so, we have a portal. You can scan the QR code on any of the cards that are here today. If you aren't familiar with that or would rather not, you can just simply go to our website and log in or create an account and submit your comments. We will put that directly into our filing paperwork that goes directly to the Superior Court. So let me tell you a little bit about what the SVP process is just briefly, and I don't know how long this meeting is going to go. As you heard, once again, we requested that this meeting be open, and we were once again denied. So we have had a lot of discussions and objections to the way today is going, and we will continue to make those objections as we go, but we don't make the rules here. So the sexually violent predator process is when someone is convicted of violent sex crimes and they have served their sentence in state prison. If they are diagnosed with a mental disorder that drives their criminal sexual behavior, then when they are set to be released from the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR actually makes a recommendation to the Department of State Hospitals and says, evaluate this particular person as a sexually violent predator. If they are later designated as that SVP, they are then taken from prison to the Department of State Hospitals, where they remain committed and undergo treatment in a secure facility. It's not prison. It is a civil commitment, not criminal. And there are due process rights that attach to that. Our office, the district attorney's office, handles those claims and those cases when people seek to get out. We evaluate, we oppose when necessary. Mr. Stevenson's case sort of follows that pattern. He was sentenced back in 1991 to a 31-year sentence for his sex crimes that occurred not in Placer County, but in El Dorado County. He served about half of that sentence. He served 15 years because the law in that case, and it hasn't gotten much better since, allows you 50% credit on those crimes. So after he served those 15 years, he was then committed as a sexually violent predator to the Department of State Hospitals. He has remained there for the last 17 years. He's undergone treatment. He has petitioned to be released, which is his right. We have opposed that. And finally, later in 2022, a Superior Court judge ruled he was to get out. So we have litigated this all along to try and keep him in.
Are you guys ready?
All right, we're back. And I apologize, I broke my leg in a sort of water skiing incident on a family houseboating trip 2 weeks ago, so I'm a little slower than normal. And if I'm going too fast, that means I'm probably going to fall down, so help me if you can. So as I was saying, so let me fast forward to what's going on here. So they're meeting now. I thought the meeting was going to be about that productive and that they were finished already, but turns out they're just beginning. This is the portion that we should be hearing, but we will not be able to. As soon as they are finished, they will come and report back. The extent of the information on the report out, we'll see what it is. Our intention all along was for this meeting to be open and for the general public to be able to hear. We disagree with their legal interpretation as to why and how they are closing this meeting. As some of you may have seen in the news, there was actually litigation this week in a Superior Court for the Department of State Hospitals to attempt to impose an even stricter amount of information that was restricted by us to be able to give to you. We were successful in that. However, the interpretation of the Bagley-Keene Act, which is a law that governs open meetings, similar to the Brown Act, for those of you that aren't familiar, us public servants are supposed to do our job in daylight and to inform the general public at each step of the way. So we disagree with this closed session. We think this should be happening in the open, but it's their meeting. Let me back up to the SVP process. The Superior Court ruled he would be conditionally released. The conditional release program is when the doctors and the court agree someone is to be released. They no longer represent a danger to the community. As I said earlier, we have disagreed with that assessment and evaluation. We litigated it. We were not successful. And ultimately, the doctors and the court said he is coming out. Because Mr. Stevenson has a record on his, address on his record on file of a Roseville address, which is where he was released the first time he was conditionally released. That address was in Roseville. He was released in 2017 into Roseville. He was conditionally released, he was released in 2014. He violated the terms of those released in 2017, and he was taken back to the Department of State Hospitals. All of the information I'm giving you today is completely public. The proposed reason for closing this meeting was to not divulge personal identifying information or health information or any of those sorts of things. The entire record is public on this particular case, so I'm not saying anything that the public can't find or doesn't already know. So the law says you must be returned to the county of domicile. Because of that address that was on his DMV record in 2014, it said Roseville. We are now legally the county of domicile, which means we're stuck. So he is presumed to be released into Placer County. The law used to be, prior to January 1 of this year, that a court would have to look at everything the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty Healthcare, everything that they were doing to try and find locations within Placer County, and if they were unsuccessful, then they would have to establish by a legal standard extraordinary circumstances is the name, that you could then go beyond that county and look elsewhere. So in 2022, prior to the law change, Liberty and the Department of State Hospitals did just that. They said, we have looked, we can't find anywhere, so we are asking the court to find extraordinary circumstances, please look elsewhere. That's why, if most of you who have been following this saw, there was a location in Amador County that had popped up. So Amador County, they had found a location, but that wasn't really vetted. It was proposed, the county of Amador came together and said, we don't want Mr. Stevenson here. That was part of the reason why he wasn't placed there, but really that address just hadn't been vetted properly. Sort of like today, we don't have an address to be able to vet properly. We should be, but we don't. Then, at the end of 2022, the law changed, and effective January 1, it requires this housing committee to meet before placement. The housing committee is made up of local partners. The whole purpose was to engage the local authorities and the community to try and decide, is this a proper place for this person to be released? The spirit of that law was to harness the participation of our county officials and our public, not to put them at the end of their meeting and basically shut them out. This is completely against the spirit of that law, but it does require us to participate in the placement process. The sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, county council, we are required to sit on this committee and discuss the information about placement, even though simultaneously we are opposing his release in the first place. So it puts us all in sort of a very awkward position. The law even states we have to have robust participation in the committee. So we can't just attend under protest. We have to participate, and we have. So all of the people that were sitting in those chairs are our county's designees to that committee. So Tim Wirtz is our district attorney representative. He's a sexually violent predator subject matter expert whose job it is to handle these kinds of cases for our office. If you heard, he made those objections. We've made them before, but we weren't going to start today's meeting without at least them acknowledging publicly that they weren't going to do what we asked them to do. So that was the reason for those requests today. So he is coming out. He's presumed to come here, and we can't release him until we have these meetings. We should have had 4 or 5 of these meetings discussing different addresses and vetting all of the issues surrounding his release. We haven't had them. The Department of State Hospitals canceled several of those meetings. We got notified in the first week of August that they were going to hold this meeting today. We were told there will be a meeting in downtown Sacramento. You are free to host the meeting if you wish. If you want to host the meeting, here's the list of requirements. You have to have an open space that has public comment. You have to have security. You have to have recording capabilities, and within a matter of less than 24 hours. And they give us a 24-hour notice. By close of business the next day, tell us if you can accommodate it, and then we'll meet in Placer County. So, no. So we moved heaven and earth, and Megan Wood, the clerk of the Board of Supervisors, the county CEO's office, the sheriff's office, members from our office did a phenomenal job to make this happen today. And when we gave them that option and said, hey, we've fulfilled all of the requirements, they said, we're still going to stay in Sacramento for our meeting. We'll do it remotely. So the fact that this room is crowded and these seats behind me are empty, save for the media, is pretty compelling, and I think shows sort of a lack of respect and apathy to our community that I think is pretty undeserved. So that's where we are. They're going to report out. We are way behind, and the Department of State Hospitals has blown the notice requirement. So the idea that a court is going to be enabled to make an informed decision on September 1st about placement is somewhat unrealistic. Our request will be to not release Mr. Stevenson at all at this point. The goal, the public, all of us need to be informed as to the conditions, the location, all of the things we need to know before this individual is released into our community. And at this point, we don't have any of it, even though this is the exact purpose of this meeting, is to discuss those issues and that information that we simply do not have. So I encourage you, use your public comment. We're going to get cut off just by timing. It's a 2-hour meeting. All the other meetings, and this new law, there's only been 2 others of these meetings. They were both scheduled for 3 hours. This one was scheduled for 2. So that was our initial request was, hey, our community is different than a lot of other communities. We're going to need 6 hours, not 2 hours. But But instead, we got 2. So I don't know how long this closed session is going to last. It could last 10 minutes. It could last 2 hours. But the balance of that will be reserved for public comment. As you heard earlier, we asked public comment to be in the beginning. It's supposed to be guided by public comment. Public comment is supposed to be the foundation of what they're talking about back there, and instead, they're making it sound as if it's a burden or an obligation. And it simply is against the spirit of the law and simply against, in my opinion, common decency. So I'm not apologizing for the Department of State Hospitals, but I'm sorry that your public comment is coming after they have concluded their business, because that is somewhat antithetical to simply good governance. So please, make your comments known. For those of you that don't have an opportunity, because we're simply probably not going to be able to get there, use the portal. There are 2 QR codes and 2 ways you can make your voices heard. And there's a woman in the back room in a tan coat, Stephanie Herrera, our public information officer, that has those flyers and codes for both. Stephanie has been the one really getting the message out on behalf of the DA's office. You can submit comments to this group today. I agree with you that it feels a little bit like, as my father would say, closing the barn door after the horses already got out, but that is your right. If you want to do both, please do, but please use our portal, because those comments will be reflected to Department of State Hospitals, but more importantly to the court on September 1st. And I think that's really where we have a chance to move the needle. So please do that, and let us know if you have any trouble with that, but let those comments be known. He will be being released. We can't litigate that. We've tried, but he certainly can't be released until we have, and you have, the information that we need to assess whether or not this county is appropriate, or whether or not we ultimately have to make another motion for those extraordinary circumstances and begin to look elsewhere. I'm cognizant of the fact that no one wants a sexually violent offender released in their neighborhood. When the law says they must get out, we just have to do it right. And right now, they're not doing it right. And our job today is to hold them accountable and make sure they do it right. I'm happy to take a few questions, because we've got some time here. So, sir, I saw your hand first. I'll go there, and then I'll come up here to the front row. So the idea of conditional release is that the Department of State Hospitals and their subcontractor, Liberty Healthcare, locates a secure residence, which means it's a house that provides security, meaning to the community from the individual, keeps the individual safe, and is a known location, and the theory is enables him to receive services and treatment that will increase his chances of success. That's the whole goal, because he's going to be out and he needs to continue to program and receive his treatment. They were unable in the last 18 months to find a location that meets that secure definition. Because they are under an order to release him, and because they haven't found a location yet, the request was made for him to be released on transient status. Transient does not mean dump him at a bus stop, but it means they have to find somewhere, and that's when they suggested. In prior cases, they have released individuals to hotels. No one wanted that option. So the only other option in the eyes of the court, between being forced to release him per his own order and not having a location, would be that transient status. And in order to fulfill that, short of a hotel, it would be to have some sort of immobilized RV unit on a piece of property. The problem with that is that the statistics and failure rate of sexually violent predators who are released on transient status are astronomical. It's a recipe for failure. It doesn't ensure the safety of the public, and it certainly doesn't enable the particular sexually violent predator to be able to optimize his chances at success. So we have opposed transient release. Our continued push to the Superior Court on September 1st will be, in the absence of a secure location, he remains in the Department of State Hospital. So that's the basis. So most of our objections, if you've seen, has been to this transient status. It's not specifically indicated in the law, but the courts of appeal have said you must release people, and if you don't have a secure location, you can release them on transient status. It's within the discretion of the court. We're asking the court to exercise his discretion appropriately and not do that option. So our goal on September 1st will say, if we're still in this position with this amount of information and we haven't had a couple of months to vet all of these locations and how it's going to work, then you keep them in. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. 66 years old. He was in his, let's see, in 2016, 17 is when he violated the conditions of his release, which is concerning to us as well. That's a big factor. He's had a chance, he blew it, and he blew it in a way that was essentially committing a new crime. And so when a court and the Department of State Hospitals makes a finding that someone is not a danger, you look at, actions speak louder than words. So past behavior is oftentimes a very good predictor of future behavior. So that is a big concern for us. And he committed that violation when he was still in his 60s. So, and sexually violent predator cases, those offenders are very different in a lot of respects. The degree of recidivism, or the degree at which they commit the offenses again, is very high. It's a compulsion. This isn't an 18-year-old kid who stole a car, who in his 50s is probably not going to do that again. This is someone who is compelled to act in this certain way, hence his designation as a sexually violent predator and his commitment in the Department of State Hospitals. So it's a good question. There was another couple of hands over here. I don't know if I answered it. Yes, ma'am. Well, he certainly has a lot more opportunity to offend and to be unsuccessful, just given the nature of the transient status. He will still be required to be monitored 24 hours a day. The Department of State Hospitals is responsible for that monitoring, so they're supposed to know where he is at all times. They're supposed to provide all of the services that they have promised to provide. We would very much hold them to their word and make sure that they do that, but it's not a gamble that my office, myself, or any of our county stakeholders are willing to risk. He violated the terms of his release once already. Yeah. Joe. No.
So the whole point of this process, this is through the course of this, seek public input in the court process normally, particular placement, or at least your office's input on particular location. But being released is transient. They're going to do that after they, right? So you're not really going to have the same level of input where his actual.
We're supposed to. So even on transient status, they are required to give us the address and then a minimum of 30 days to be able to vet that address. And frankly, the general public is our best ally in vetting that process. I don't know all of the bus stops and daycares and things of any particular location. So what they are supposed to do, and what I thought we would be talking about today, is a particular location. And if they bring it up today for the first time in closed session, we are well within our 30 days to the September 1st court hearing. We're 10 days out. So under no circumstances will we be ready to start talking about release on September 1st if today is the first day. If they don't give us an address between, well, frankly, even if they do it today, but at any point now, we're supposed to be 30 days before the next court hearing that we are entitled to have that information. So they're supposed to give it to us. Maybe they've got one, and if they do, then they're sharing it in closed session. Then we'll have some time to vet it. But no matter what address or location, we'll be going to the court on September 1st saying they blew their 30 days. And frankly, we should have been talking about this for much more than 30. 30 days is the minimum, not the best practice. Does that answer your question? Okay. That was a reluctant yes. I think I left something out. Ma'am. I appreciate the sentiment. I don't actually know. Sir. Oh, ma'am. The judge that hears it is public information. We all live and work in this business, so it's generally a practice amongst people who work in this that, we disagree with his legal decisions and we will show up every day, and we're not keeping it a secret. But I also don't want to be the one that encourages people who might be thinking extreme thoughts to do something bad. It's readily accessible, and he's frankly making a legal determination based on what he interprets as is adequate and is the right thing to do. He has reports from the Department of State Hospitals saying this man doesn't represent a danger, and he's under some due process considerations. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a process that keeps people incarcerated beyond their prison sentence. So from the opposite perspective, this is someone who presumably paid their debt. Now, I have lots of issues with the amount of time it takes for people to pay their debt and how much discount time they get. Don't get me wrong there. But he completed his sentence in the eyes of the Department of Corrections. And then he was taken for another almost 2 decades civilly, which the difference between criminal and civil doesn't make much difference when you're the one being locked up. So there needs to be due process for us to do that. A civilized society, before we take someone's liberty, and I firsthand do this every day, I take nothing more seriously than my ability to take people's freedom. That is something that doesn't come lightly and should only come with the appropriate due process. So this due process means the judge has to receive input from all sides. And it's a Placer County Superior Court judge. Because we're the county of domicile, it returns to our courts, gets assigned to a judge here who has to listen to the Department of State Hospitals saying, we've had this man for 17 years in our care, and yes, he's been released and failed once, but we think he has been successful. We disagree. And that's our process. Our process is take both sides, go in front of a neutral and independent judge, and make our arguments, and make them, as forcefully as we can, which we have done. And the judge disagreed with our position, and the judge is feeling that same pressure from, the due process rights of the individual who's been committed, the doctor's reports, and our interpretation and our position that he still remains a danger. So the judge has to strike that balance, and has. I disagree with it, and we will, through all lawful means, continue to disagree with it. And I think as important is our obligation to share what we're doing and how we're doing it with our community. I've handled dozens of these cases throughout the course of my career, and I have seen judges agree with me, and I've had judges disagree with me. But what never changes is our requirement and our need for our public to understand how this process works, so that you can be here today and express your opinion. Yeah. No, he did not. So the Department of State Hospitals filed a motion, what we call a protective order, sort of commonly referred to as a gag order, which said legally you can't talk about what occurs during this meeting, during the closed session portion of the meeting. We opposed that. The judge ruled on our side and said, absolutely not. I'm not going to issue that rule. The second part of the problem is that this, because it's a state agency, it's governed by this law, the Bagley-Keene Act, which says most public meetings are presumed to be open. They have to be notified, the notice to the public. The public has to know what's happening. They have to have an opportunity to have input, and you should generally conduct your meetings in public. That's why we see our Board of Supervisors meeting every other Tuesday to the general public, responsive to the community. There's an exception that allows that government body to go into closed session and to discuss things in private. The law says if they go into closed session, and there are things that are confidential in nature legally that government officials cannot divulge. If it occurs in closed session, they can't reveal it. So even though we won that first step, the gag order from the court, the Department of State Hospitals' interpretation of the Bagley-Keene Act says we are entitled to go into closed session, and once we do, it's private. And we are now forced in a position of we have a representative back there receiving information that we would like to divulge to the public. But we'd be breaking the law if we divulge it. So the court hearing, the gag order was one step. The Department of State Hospitals' interpretation of the Bagley-Keene Act is a separate one. So at some point, either we'll try and reveal information under appropriate legal means, or the Department of State Hospitals will affirmatively try and prevent us from doing it, and we'll have to litigate it in front of somebody. So that particular issue, and I'm getting really in the legal weeds here, but that particular issue is not before the judge that heard this issue. That judge heard that other motion that they filed. They filed basically an extra layer of protection, and the judge said, I'm not going to do that. So we won that, but we're still in this position of being regulated by the Bagley-Keene Act, even though I would love nothing more than to have my representative come out and say, take the microphone and tell us everything they said. I am hopeful that they will fulfill their obligation and come out, and that the report out that they're going to give us when this meeting is concluded substantially encapsulates everything that was discussed. I would sincerely hope they do that. That's the spirit of the law. That's their obligation. I just don't know what it's going to be. And then we're in a difficult position because I can't willfully violate the law, even though I disagree with this. So we'll have an opportunity at some point to litigate the issue, and that's something we do very well. Ma'am. No, you're free. It's an open court hearing. It is September 1st, and the only thing I will just sort of advise you of, the judge is not required to take public comment, so it's not a forum like this. It's a courtroom, which means he'll hear from both parties, which is why we have established this portal, because from our side, we get to submit anything we want, and the judge is required to consider it. So give us your thoughts, give us how you feel about this, and we make it part of the court record, and then the judge is required to do it. You can show up and maybe the judge says, hey, I'm willing to take public comment. Generally they don't, just because they're there to resolve the issue that's at hand, and that is that issue. So if you do attend, we welcome it. It's a public open court, as most 99% of court proceedings are. You just may not have the same opportunity today to give orally at least your feedback, which is why we've created that opportunity for you to do it in written form so that we can submit that directly to the court. Wonderful question. Ma'am. So ultimately the judge is the ultimate decision maker as to whether or not a particular piece of property is appropriate. So theoretically we would get an address. Our first order of business is usually to get with our housing committee, most likely the sheriff's office, and say, hey, let's take a look at this property. If it's in the unincorporated area of the county's jurisdiction, if it happens to be in the city limits, we would include the police chief as well and say, what do we know about this property? Let's tell the general public, maybe they know something, and that's what we saw happen in Amador. We've seen it happen on these cases all the time, because perhaps there's an informal daycare being run. Perhaps there's a bus stop right there. Perhaps there are actual things with that property that legally make it inappropriate, or maybe there are things, maybe necessarily not legally inappropriate, but it's just not suitable. And one of the things, for example, in our county, we have a very geographically diverse county. Maybe they pick an area that doesn't have cell service. Maybe GPS is spotty. Well, that's going to eliminate that from being a feasible option. So it's got to fulfill all of the basic legal requirements, and it's got to pass our sniff test essentially and say, is this a suitable location that allows for proper supervision and the best opportunity for Mr. Stevenson to obtain the services that presumably will make him not offend again, because that is the goal. If we can't stop his release, we need to stop him from reoffending. So that's sort of the vetting process, and it's just, you give me a particular location, I'm born and raised in this area, I know most of those locations, but I don't know the specifics. And then we would call on the public to say, wait a minute, I know, don't you know, that's where the kids get dropped off. That's the bus stop every day, or whatever the particular circumstance is. So that's what I mean by vetting. We just have to do our due diligence and determine whether or not that's an appropriate address for this individual, with the understanding nobody wants it. Nobody wants it near them. Nobody wants it in their community. No one would really want them thrust in someone else's community, but we're sort of having to deal with his release. The best we can do is at least make sure it doesn't set him up for failure or put the community at unnecessary risk. Yes, ma'am. So things like GPS, actual physical visits, he'll have probably a series of check-ins. He'll have what I would assume would be practitioners that are there to either bring services to him or to take him to services, therapy, all of his rehabilitative things. So there will be a whole host of requirements, and we should, and I am confident we'll have the opportunity to vet some of those and suggest others. Maybe we're unhappy with the level of security they've provided. They're free to contract locally. They haven't, as far as I know, as of today, have not reached out to do that. I don't know that that's something that is something that we would want to do. It's up to them. This is their process, but we also need to make sure everybody else does their job as well. Yes, ma'am. So two separate questions there. I don't think there's anything, I haven't really focused on his driving record too much in light of everything else he's done. If there's no other prohibitions as to get it, I don't know that he'd be restricted. from getting it. However, his ability to travel on his own will absolutely be restricted. So I would find it unlikely that he would be able to obtain one. I don't know if there's anything legally preventing him. What will be restricted is his ability to move freely, and that's the cost that he bears for his life of crime. So in that security, from the man that asked the previous question, those are the kind of things that will be restricted. He is not going to be free to go. No, there will absolutely be parameters, and that's one thing we will stay on top of and make sure. And if for some reason we don't feel those are adequate, we will be the first to tell Department of State Hospitals, and if they don't listen, we'll be in front of the Superior Court, and you can sure as heck bet we'll be informing all of you along the way about their progress. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's the finding that is made in order for him to be released, is that the doctors have to sort of be the ones to propose his release after their assessments of him, and then given to the Superior Court, who makes a finding that he's not a danger. And that obviously, the thrust of your question is right on. It concerns us that there's already been one violation. Does that mean no one is deserving of second chances of redemption? That doesn't mean that, but I certainly eliminate that benefit of the doubt, given the nature of the crimes, given the nature of these proceedings, and given the fact that he has violated once already. So that is perhaps one of the biggest factors that we have been using to say, hey, look, we've already been through this once. We don't want to be through this again, certainly at the hands of someone that could potentially be victimized. Oh, I'm sorry, I will, sorry. Hey, Stephanie, will you do me a favor and hand me the water? I'm sorry. I have gotten, unfortunately, good at shamelessly asking people to do things for me now. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Yep.
But before I take one more question, I did want to acknowledge some of our elected representatives who are here, some of our friends in the and allies here that represent our county in the state legislature are taking time away from the business of trying to hold the rest of the state legislature accountable to keep our quality of life here. But Congressman Kevin Kiley will be here if he's not here quite yet. We appreciate his attendance. State Assemblyman Joe Patterson, our friend in the legislature, is here. State Senator Marie Alvarado Gill, another friend of ours in the legislature. We thank her for her attendance. Our Placer County Chair of the Board of Supervisors, Jim Holmes, is here. I think he's holding up a wall over there. Supervisor Shanti London is here. We really appreciate her attendance. Landon, I don't know why I went British on you all of a sudden. And Supervisor Suzanne Jones here in the front row, she is here as well. And Annabelle Velasquez, I don't know if she is here yet. She's in the back. She'll be speaking later. She is a survivor of violent crime, has partnered with our office to help in our Empower and Resilience project to help sort of raise the voices for crime victims and survivors in our community, and we thank her for being here today as well. This is the awkward part where I say, did I leave anybody out? Oh, and we're back. Thank you all. If I didn't hit any of your questions, I'm happy to do them at a later time.
The committee is back in open session. For the minutes, the Housing Committee members are present, and we will proceed with the next item on the agenda, reporting of any actions taken in closed session. The committee reports there was discussion of a potential housing location and associated issues. No actions were taken. Liberty will further investigate information and locations. We will now proceed to agenda item 4 and take public comment.
Thank you. The remainder of our meeting time will be allotted for public comment. The Housing Committee will hear your comments and will not be responding to public comments or questions. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to provide a comment, and staff will let you know when there are 20 seconds left. Please note, in addition to providing verbal public comment at this meeting, There are additional opportunities to provide public comment, including via an electronic form on the DSH's website at dsh.ca.gov, or by completing the paper form we have on site, which can be sent today at this meeting or mailed to DSH within the acceptance period. If you would like to provide public comment now, please organize in a line behind the microphone for providing your comment. We would appreciate it if you would identify yourself and any organization you represent, but you're not required to do so. You may proceed with your comment. Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to make a statement too, that how we want to start this off is we have a number of individuals from Placer County here in Sacramento as well. So we want to start off with comments from Sacramento, and then we'll pivot to Auburn. Okay.
Great, thanks, Dr. Bagwell. My name is Bruce Alshelt. I'm the mayor of the city of Roseville. I will not take 2 minutes because there's a large group in Auburn that I think it's important for you to hear from. I wished that this hearing had been in Placer County, but last Wednesday, August 19th, the Roseville City Council unanimously adopted a resolution to send a letter to Dr. Bagwell on the inappropriateness of having the multi-time offender placed in a transient situation in Roseville, California. We don't allow prisoners in Roseville, California. So it would be highly inappropriate. Our city attorney, city manager, and chief of police signed that letter, and it is directed toward you. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
So the report date, that feedback deadline for the report.
Thank you, Bruce.
Good morning. My name is Ken Broadway. I'm the mayor for the city of Rockland. I'm here today to speak on behalf of my wife, my 2 daughters, and the residents of the city of Rockland. We are adamantly opposed to the transient release of this individual, given the history of this individual and the potential for release of this individual in the city of Rockland. We are extremely concerned with the safety of our residents. We do not feel that a transient release is appropriate. And we also believe that this process has been very restrictive in the ability of residents to speak on behalf of their opposition to this. And therefore, I am here today to speak on their behalf, and again, want to list our opposition to the transient release of this individual into our community. Thank you.
Just pointing out.
Good morning, David Bass, Rockland City Council. I can't say better than that. So I'm here to voice my opposition, as well as my opposition to, well, my point of view as to how this whole thing has been held. I do think that there's been severe unfairness to Placer County in general, as well as to our district attorney, whether it was the gag order or how this hearing has been conducted. Having the closed session first, I understand you're right.
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
That's the way that the law is written, but I do
And
think
everybody, I'm glad to finally
transparency
after
is
next
truly
year,
unfair to the residents of
before
Placer County. Thank you.
With that, I'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting at 10:26. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Dave Butler. I'm a former member of Rockland City Council and Placer County community for much of my 20 years serving in a full-time leadership role. Early here today as a husband, as a father of 2 grown daughters, and as a grandfather of 2 granddaughters. We're extremely concerned about the entrance and being released back into our community. But also, and the primary balance that with the rights of women, we understand this. But what makes it concerning is the arbitrary nature, seeming process, which makes it
The California Friendship Conference, it's online and available now before the
Excuse me, Lisa, DHS? We can hear you over here. There's laughing and conversations happening, and this is not a topic to be laughing about. So I hope that you can put yourselves on mute to save your own dignity and respect.
There aren't any people laughing. Sounds all parties.
I want to keep it quick. Foster County is a good place for an SVP. We're a family-oriented community. Please do not put our children at risk. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Okay, with that, give it over to Auburn. Like your comments. Go ahead. We're not hearing anything. Individuals by the microphones to provide public comment?
We're not sure if you can hear us over here. Can you raise your hand if you can hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay, so there's a lot of feedback happening, including side conversations and laughter coming from your room. Can you put an end to that?
There's no.
If you have a separate meeting room happening, there's side conversations, laughter, it's completely inappropriate.
Next time there's a meeting.
If you can mute every participant except for this room, that would be helpful, please. Okay, I'm going to move forward because this is part of the reason why this is a problem. So my name is State Senator Marie Alvarado Gill, and I proudly represent the northeastern portion of Placer County in the 4th Senate District. I've been following this situation in 2 of my other counties that I represent, both El Dorado and Amador County, to vigilantly protect our community by opposing the placement of any sexually violent predator where the safety of children and families are at risk. I want to underscore my disappointment with the Department of State Hospital's refusal to hold an open public meeting or to even give us the dignity of muting your microphone. I'm urging you to reconsider the way that you treat constituents. You've made excuses rather than stepping up to perform your duty. Furthermore, you've neglected to even show up in person to today's event to face the people that you represent. You serve as public servants, and it is unacceptable. We are accountable to the people. The placement of any SVP predator under the California Department of State Hospital supervision is a critical responsibility within a direct impact of the public trust and of their government agencies. Today, you are hurting the trust in public agencies by not being here. The placement decisions should be made with public input and evidence-based criteria that protects victims and the public first and foremost. The process utilized by the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty has left me with deep vitriol concerns with regard to a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability, and an apathetic approach to public safety. Limiting the meetings, last-minute venue decisions, and a general unwillingness to work with local elected and state representatives is unacceptable. DHS and their contractor Liberty Healthcare continue to lack the due diligence to determine suitable placement and conduct necessary community outreach, presenting a negligent and lack of trust in our judicial system and state government. It is our jobs to protect the safety of the most vulnerable in our communities. Transient placement is dangerous and places an undue burden on the local community and public agencies that mitigate the serious risks to protect the innocent. I again reaffirm my commitment to host an oversight hearing of the DHS contract with Liberty Healthcare in leadership and conjunction with Senator Brian Daly, and I will see that the public is provided the transparent and accountability that they deserve. As an advocate and survivor of sexual assault myself, and now your senator, I hold the duty to steward the very best interest of my constituents, and I will stand firmly in holding DHS accountable for conducting placement process in full transparency and a way that puts our public first.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Senator. Jim Holmes here, Placer County Chair of the Placer County Board of Supervisors. I've got a lot to say, but you've only given me 2 minutes to say it, so I'll make it as quick as possible. We have severe public safety concerns. Releasing William Stevenson as a transient into Placer County poses a significant risk to public safety. Providing a sexually violent predator with an RV or motel room and calling it adequate housing poses a huge danger to the community and should not be a consideration. Rather than releasing Stevenson into a transient setting, alternate options such as long-term residential treatment facilities or supervisors housing must be found. These alternatives would provide better control over Stevenson's movements and activities. Rehabilitation. Despite any claims of rehabilitation, the nature of sexually violent offenses suggests a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior that is extremely difficult to change. Lack of monitoring. Placing Stevenson in a transient setting could make it a challenge for authorities to effectively monitor his activities and whereabouts. Repeat offender potential. Studies have shown that sexually violent predators often have a high rate of recidivism, meaning they are more likely to commit the same or similar offenses again. Victims' concerns. Releasing Stevenson into unsupervised setting could cause emotional distress and re-traumatization for his past victims. It's crucial to consider the impact on survivors when making decisions about the placement of sexually violent predators. The release of sexually violent predator William Stevenson as a transient into Placer County presents serious public safety concerns, potential for repeat offenses, and negative impacts on the community. Alternative solutions that prioritize public safety and rehabilitation should be explored to ensure the well-being of both residents and potential victims. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you so much. My name's Joe Patterson. I'm an assemblyman representing the 5th Assembly District. And first I want to say I appreciate my constituents and all my friends from Placer County and for coming to be here today and expressing their concern. Sometimes you do things in your life you don't realize they're going to be relevant, but I actually worked for the legislator that wrote the California Sex Offender Management Board legislation in 2006, and he also chaired the High-Risk Sex Offender and Sexually Violent Predator Task Force. And during that entire time, there was never any consideration, and in fact, the exact opposite, that a sexually violent predator would ever be released on transient status. And I want to say 2 things that come to mind. First of all, if you read the report, which I did, the California Sex Offender Management Board, which happened to be released a few years after, it's filled with information about how important the public process is at this time. And I feel like giving people an entire 2 hours for a hearing in a very engaged community is really doing a disservice. While I appreciate the law has changed to basically mandate these types of hearings, I think as the district attorney might agree with me, this violates the very spirit of the law that was passed to allow public participation. And also, the entire report is filled with safe location. And as of today, we don't know what the location's going to be. We just know that it's going to be transient status. So I can't, as a state legislator, I can't opine on whether I think that that's safe for my constituents or not. But we also have to remember that this gentleman, which, well, let me take that back, he's not a gentleman. He has already shown a propensity to continue to do the crimes that he does. And we can debate whether or not whether he should be allowed out of prison at all. But the fact is the law allows him to be put out of prison. And we have to give him the opportunity to have success that gives him the best ability to not reoffend, to not create more victims. And this does the exact opposite. So again, I want to say I went to check the Sex Offender Management Board. I went back on prior hearings for 16 years. Please.
Please keep in mind the time limit. Are you able to wrap up very quickly?
Yes, I'm working on it.
Okay, thank you.
There's never any discussion about transient status, and I want to say one more thing to make it clear. This is a loophole that is going to be closed, and I will be introducing legislation this week to close the loophole.
Thank you for your comment.
Good morning. My name is Nina Salerno-Besselman. I serve as the president of Crime Victims United. First of all, I want to thank all the elected officials that are here and the public to speak out. It seems like lack of transparency has been the theme through this entire process, from closed court hearings to closed in-session hearings today. The California Constitution, Article 1, Section 28, mandates that California follow the law and that the victim be heard from in any proceeding that affects sentencing. This is a quasi-criminal proceeding, and the victims have yet to ever be notified or heard. The entire process has shut out the victims of crime. The very voices that should be the most important, from whether a judge considers release to you considering to where he should be housed. These victims are going to be traumatized again, and there will be new victims. So the fact that your lack of transparency has shut down the victim's voice from the beginning makes this entire process void. Crime Victims United intends to file a brief and be heard on September 1st alongside the district attorney to reverse the decision to mandate that the California Constitution be followed, the victims be notified, and the opportunity to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Good morning. My name's Dan Catania. I'm a concerned citizen. I represent some friends and family who are very concerned about this. I did a little research online, and in the 1990s, I believe it was 1996, Larry LaCroix was about to be released from prison, and he asked the parole board to be castrated because he knew that he would attack another child. I did a little research, and there's scientific proof on both sides that this is a problem that's inherited from birth. It cannot be changed. Some scientists say, oh, they can change it with drugs. But my question is this: how do they know that drugs work on every single individual? And even if they did, who's to say this person would continue taking drugs? My question is, why would anybody in their right mind want to deprive another child of his life? This person has destroyed his life. He has destroyed his victim's life. Why would you want to give him a chance to destroy another life? I, as a citizen, so appreciate law enforcement, especially the sheriff's department. They have a tough job. Why do we want to make it tougher? People in this state are fleeing. Law-abiding citizens, taxpayers, are fleeing the once golden state because of mandate, taxes, all the different restrictions being put on people. And then to turn around and take restrictions off of criminals and put this back in the community. How many parents have left this state because what they're teaching in school is harming their children? Imagine how they're going to feel now. I'm a parent and a grandparent. I know if my children were in school today, if I had young children that this man could prey upon, I would be out of here. I wouldn't care what the climate was in another state. I wouldn't care what taxes were in another state. I would care about safety. And that's all I would care about. So, I am urging the people in power to think about the law-abiding citizens, think about the parents, and above all, think about the children that this can affect. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Brian Perry. I'm a resident of Roseville. I've worked in the criminal justice system for 50 years. And based on my experience, there are two types of offenders that will not rehabilitate and are most likely to reoffend. And sexual violent predators are one of that group. So based on my experience and this particular individual's background, to me it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when he is going to reoffend. And let me make a comment about 24-hour supervision and 24-hour monitoring. You've got to take into consideration human error. Mistakes are made. People escape. People disappear. People get away. People cut off their leg monitors. So at this point in time, I understand the law, and I know he's going to come out, but I can tell you this, the end game isn't going to be good. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Debbie McMahon, and I'm a concerned citizen. Placer County has grown exponentially in the last few years. Geographically goes from Roseville to Nevada border to Lake Tahoe. It is common knowledge resources are down in all law enforcement agencies. Allowing William Stevenson, a transient, to be released is a danger to every person living in Placer County. He has proven many times that he is unable to be trusted. There are not enough resources to ensure the safety of the people living in Placer County. I would like to ask you a question. If something were to happen to your children or your grandchildren due to your decision to accept the sexual predator, will you be looking into their face and saying, "You're sorry"? That won't be good enough. There's possibly could be years of therapy necessary, and your relationship could be in danger of never recovering. I have grandchildren I'm concerned for. They go to school, they walk to their friend's house, or go shopping. Releasing him into our county is a mistake that unfortunately someone in this county may pay the price if you allow him to stay here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Soto, and I represent over 1,739 residents of Placer County who vehemently oppose the release of Stevenson into our county. The Change.org petition titled "Stop the Release of the Violent Sexual Predator William Stevenson in Placer County" the community strongly is in opposition to the release of Mr. William Stevenson. It stems from deeply concerning nature of his criminal history, the potential risk that his release could pose to the public safety. The petition reflects the collective voice of those who believe that careful consideration, thorough evaluation of the situation are critical before any decisions regarding his release are made. We kindly request that the Department of State Hospitals acknowledge the concerns raised in the Change.org petition and take that into account during your decision-making process. The safety of the community must remain a paramount consideration in such matters. We understand these decisions involve a thorough review of legal and clinical factors. We request that Mr. Stevenson not be released into Placer County. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Good morning. My name is Laura Strasser. I'm a resident of Placer County. I'm also an attorney in this county. This criminal, and I won't use his name because I don't think he deserves that courtesy, has a long history dating back to 1985, including indecent exposure, sexual assault, and possession of child sexual abuse materials. He is, by the very definition, a sexual violent predator. As an attorney in this community, I am appalled at the failures of this state, in particularly the Department of State Hospitals, to ensure the safety of our residents or to even remotely consider the impact on this community. You have failed your community in so many ways. You have failed to secure suitable housing before his release, so now he's our problem. He's now a transient, meaning a person that moves from place to place, allowing for difficulties in tracking and supervising and allowing him the opportunity to reoffend. You have failed his future victims and his victims from the past. You have failed to consider how the Auburn community is suffering already. We anticipate you are choosing Auburn as the drop-off point for this felon. Why? Because Auburn holds the corrections department and one of the Placer County probation offices that he would likely have to report to. You have failed to consider the homeless and transient crisis we already have in Placer County and particularly in Auburn. Auburn is already reeling from the decisions to allow so much of that and not to be able to resolve that problem of transients. You failed to consider the growing crime in Placer County, in particular North Auburn, but you choose to release him here despite the growing number of service calls, tightening the squeeze on our already overworked law enforcement officers. You have failed to protect us from the obvious. A sexual predator has problems with self-regulation and impulse control. That doesn't just disappear. This predator is physically strong and healthy enough to cause more harm.
Minute time limit. Can you wrap up your comments?
I am wrapping it up. Sexual recidivism, the return to criminal conduct, that doesn't go away. And your biggest failure, sir, is attempting to exclude the public with your motion on Friday, setting this meeting last minute during the week when people couldn't attend, but you knew that. So releasing this felon to our community is an epic failure on your part. Don't leave us to clean up your mess.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Linda Musser. I live in Lincoln, and I'm here to represent every single person I have talked to since I found out about what's going on. I've stopped people on the street asking them if they've known about this. Some say no, and they said, if you do go to the meeting, please express our concerns and that we do not wish to have this person in Placer County or any county. Please take into consideration what you're doing to us, and I appreciate y'all.
My name is Matthew Oliver, and today I am representing the people that are ticked off. The disrespect and the disregard of our community is appalling. The fact that you are not here to look us in the eye while you want to release a repeat violent sexual predator on our children and on our families is disgusting. The fact that you refuse to involve the community in this process is a joke. The fact that you refuse to get off of your high horse in Sacramento and do what is best for our community is not okay. We should have been a part, and we should be a part. You need to take the time to do what is right and then to do it right. Our children and our families' lives depend on it. As a survivor of a sexual assault, the question is, who will be his next victim, and what are you willing to do to stop it? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jill Gallardo. I'm a council member from the great city of Rockland, and I am here representing Rockland, but I'm also the grandmother of 8, and I am here representing all of our communities in Team Placer, including Colfax, Penryn, Loomis, every place where we have children, we hear and we speak together. I want to tell you, we are incredibly fortunate that our District Attorney Morgan Gear and his team and our Sheriff Wayne Wu and his team are here to protect us and have notified us and provided us with the opportunity to be here. If not for their voices, I don't believe we'd have this opportunity. This issue did not slip up and sneak up on us. You've known this was coming for some time, and yet I can tell you as a council member, I didn't hear anything from you. I didn't hear anyone reach out and ask for our input. I got it from our own team. You're sitting down in Sacramento, and that is a very clear message to me. You should be here. This is where we are, and this is the community that you're going to impact. You should be here, and your absence sends a clear message. This is a high-risk offender, and I understand what the position you're in. You have some challenges, but this is a high-risk offender, and to consider releasing this individual as a transient, which is an even higher risk, is completely unacceptable. You should have met with this, we should have talked about our options, and come up with a plan for success, because our number one priority, and it needs to be yours, is protect our children. Thank you.
Good morning, my name's Skip Myers, resident of Placer County. Everything begins with self-control and self-government. It's obvious that this violent sexual predator has not engaged with self-control or self-government. And let me make some other comments here. I strongly oppose, as do my neighbors and my friends, the release of this individual, and we declare that he should remain in DSH. And the following concerns need to be addressed to ensure critical public safety prior to a consideration of community release. 1, what does the victim and the victim's family, a 2017 event, think of this individual's release? And nowhere have I seen any report on any victim statement. Second, who would supervise this individual in the community? How does this work? Does this person have powers of arrest, the individual who's monitoring? Third, the May 4th, 2023 letter by Senator Brian Jones to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee regarding an audit of Liberty Healthcare must be completed prior to this SVP's release. Fourth, the 10 bullet point concerns noted in the August 11, 2023 memo by Placer County District Attorney Morgan Geyer must be addressed prior to SVP Stevenson's release. Fifth, does an ankle monitor tracking system prevent this individual from committing a crime while still being monitored? Good question. And then lastly, who will be personally responsible for a reoffense by SVP Stevenson? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Jean Ketterling, and I'm representing the government of which there is no end, the government of which the United States of America, one nation under God, was established on. Therefore, I suggest he be put out of the U.S. of A.
Good morning. My name is Annabelle Velasquez, and I'm a survivor and victim advocate. First of all, thank you to the Placer County DA's office and the Sheriff's office in allowing a concerned resident and a survivor like myself to share my feelings in regards to the release of this disgusting SVP. The pride and honor I feel is immense being part of Placer County, and even more so after they've given us this opportunity for this type of platform. Don't take that away from us. I'm here today as someone who survived some of the very same types of assaults that this SVP has committed. No one came to my aid. Justice wasn't served on my behalf because back then I was made to feel that it was my fault and my assailants all got away, which is why I'm right here, right now. I will no longer suffer in silence, and hearing this brings up the nightmares all over again. I'm here to be a voice for the voiceless, but also for those that couldn't make it today, which I know is to be designed by the way. There are so many people that have conveyed their voices in which he is not welcome in their neighborhoods. I'm begging you to hear us. There's so many cases where the system has failed their communities and then later showed remorse at the cost of another victim. But why wait? Why test those waters? We already know firsthand that he cannot control himself. There's kids everywhere. Are you going to be the ones that hang your head in shame when he attacks another human being? Will you be able to face the victims and say sorry yourselves? Or will you shroud that with some political BS and deflect it on the SVP's humanitarian rights? What about the victims? And what about the survivors? What about their rights? The fact that you were even contemplating on doing this in secret tells the community you don't care about us, but you care more about the predator's well-being. This secrecy is extremely triggering to me and traumatic to say at the very least, and there needs to be a change. The fact that you couldn't even drive here to face us in person says volumes. There's so much more to say, but this is what I want our state to know for the time allotted.
Thank you for your comment.
My name is Irma Ratliff. I am a citizen of Placer County and outraged at the proposal of a transient release of this most violent sexual predator. When you look at his past history, where he was incarcerated and supposedly being rehabbed, his crimes escalated before he was caught, from indecent exposure to rape to oral copulation by force, and then on to crimes against children. And the Department of Rehab of state hospitals is saying that he is now ready for release. I would say to you who are saying this, that you place him next to your home and your children, your grandchildren, and tell us that he is safe to be released. Just because someone has served time doesn't mean you need to let him into the community to victimize all of us. It also doesn't mean that the victims and the destruction he did to their lives should no longer matter, and let this creep back onto our streets to have more victims because suddenly he's entitled to rights that he took away from others. What will it take? Somebody next time losing their life? He has nothing to lose. He has spent 30 years behind bars. He won't care what he does to his next victim. And that needs to be taken into consideration on this ridiculous transient release. Thank you.
My name is Amanda Cortez, and I am here from the Loomis Town Council and also speaking on behalf of Mayor Cartwright. We mostly just want to echo everything that everybody else is saying, but in our communities, we have been fighting like hell against highly sexualizing our youth and our schools. You put this predator next to our towns, what is that going to do again? You are going to be continuing a cycle of pain and then other people creating more crime from the pain and the things that they're doing. This is a vicious cycle and it needs to be stopped. I echo the lady before me, put him next to your house, next to your grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren and I have raised children through the Loomis school districts. This is not something that our community wants nor needs, and our town council will do everything we can to keep our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Shannon Carrier, and I am a father of 4 daughters and a grandfather of 4 amazing grandkids. And I am completely opposed to this individual being released into the community. I've served as a youth pastor for a number of years and have seen firsthand the impact that sexual predators have had on children, and I'm opposed to it, and this is ridiculous that this is even being discussed at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Shanti Landon. I'm a Placer County Supervisor for District 2. As a former victim of a violent crime and someone who experienced childhood sexual abuse myself, I can't even watch a movie that has sexually violent scenes, let alone comprehend how our own justice system is purposefully skirting the public process and putting the rights of a perpetrator over the rights of law-abiding citizens. If it weren't for our own DA's office, this likely would be moving forward with no notification for our community. There was minimal notice about this meeting, and it's being held during work and school hours when the very people who are most impacted, young children and young families, cannot be here. Mr. Stevenson cannot be released until we know the conditions and location of his release. Please show that you value the rights of our community and go through the proper public process to identify an appropriate location for this predator to be released. Take the time to allow our DA's office to do their job and provide their input during this process. There should be no rush here when we are talking about the very lives of our children. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm John Brewer from Auburn.
Liberty Healthcare is aiding and abetting his future crimes by providing a motorhome. He cannot be tracked, and I-80 is already a corridor for sex trafficking. If this were to go through, the public has to be provided a picture of the vehicle, its years, make, model, license plate, and location of delivery. Also, his current photo on file when released. You don't try this in smaller towns. We watch out for each other and are very diligent of the homeless in motorhomes. We will flood law enforcement with calls on a daily basis.
Thank you for your comments.
Good morning. My name is Wayne Wu, and I am currently the Sheriff of Placer County. I'd like to express my frustration and disappointment with this entire process. In my opinion, this is just another example of failed criminal justice policies that are decimating the state of California. And Mr. Stevenson has a long criminal history, which I know you're aware of, and he earned the status and the classification of being a sexually violent predator. Now let's just go back to his last release, which is why Placer County is saddled with this. We're really to assume one of two things. Either the Department of State Hospitals feels like they adequately programmed Mr. Stevenson so he could go to the conditional release program, or Mr. Stevenson manipulated the Department of State Hospitals and told them what they wanted to hear in order to get release. The fact of the matter remains that Mr. Stevenson reoffended while he was assigned to Placer County by being in possession of child pornography. Now, fast forward to today, we're to assume that once again, the Department of State Hospitals programming has been even more successful than last time, so successful that you're willing to release him in transient status, a status which has a lower success rate than what he was released on last time. Or the latter. He has manipulated the Department of State Hospitals once again to earn his release back into this community. Now, Mr. Stevenson himself said he didn't want to come back to Placer County. He acknowledges he has no ties here. I would assume Mr. Stevenson might have a little bit of knowledge on what he needs to be successful, and actually this is in one point where I actually agree with him. He should not be in Placer County. So while it might be easy to gamble the community's safety from the comforts of Sacramento on Mr. Stevenson being successful this time, I, for one, am not comfortable with that. Based off of his past behavior and the reason he's coming back to Placer County now, I will continue to oppose any release to this community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good morning. My name is Morgan Geyer. I'm the Placer County District Attorney. As the one here closing it up, I don't think I can say anything that hasn't already been said. I think our community has demonstrated their resilience, their spirit, and their desire to be informed in this process. I would hope moving forward that you would shed your reluctance to engage in transparency and openness in all meetings. We obviously legally disagree on the need for the closed session today, and frankly, your absence here today projects an apathy that is not deserved by our residents. So I hope moving forward that we will continue to push for an open process so that our community can be informed, and that we will do everything absolutely necessary to ensure that occurs, and that Mr. Stevenson is not released one moment earlier than we have to fully vet this entire process. I want to thank the community behind me, our community leaders, and our concerned citizens for all of their comments today, and I look forward to a more open and transparent meeting in the future regarding the release of Mr. Stevenson. Thank you.
Are there any more public comments? We have another public comment from Sacramento.
Thank you very much. My name is Roger Nilo. I'm the state senator that represents District 6, which includes Placer County. I can't add a lot to all of the comments that have been made. I do appreciate the allowance for the hearing in Placer County as well as downtown. But the fact of the matter is William Stevenson has an almost 4 decade history of reprehensible crimes. He's been given chances in the past and has violated those chances. Frankly, I believe that the Sexually Violent Predator Act gives the ability to maintain the gentleman in state hospital. I do not believe he deserves to be released anywhere, least of which in Placer County. And I urge, well, I would say especially under what I would call the lenient circumstances of his supervision with this transient placement.
Thank you. It doesn't look like there are any more comments from Placer County, so now we'll hand it back over to.
Thank you for your comments and participation. Committee members will continue to assess potential placement locations and gather information. The next Housing Committee meeting will be scheduled as needed. As a reminder, if you did not get an opportunity to provide a public comment, you can go to the DSH website and submit it electronically or complete the paper form, which can be submitted here or mailed and postmarked within the acceptance period. For the purpose of this Housing Committee meeting, we will accept comments from August 20th through August 22nd, 2023. Any further meetings will be noticed in accordance with the Bagley-Keene Act and will be posted on the DSH website at dsh.ca.gov. The meeting is now adjourned. Oh.
5 o'clock tomorrow? You said the 22nd. You said comments would be set on the 22nd?
The 20th through the 22nd.
5 p.m.?
Yes.
By midnight.
Oh, sorry, by midnight. By midnight.
Sorry for, yeah, thank you for that clarification.
The meeting is now adjourned.
Can you turn this on for them?
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for attending the meeting here, personally here in Placer County. We do appreciate all of your attendance. Just to let you know, we are holding a press conference here shortly after we can get the room rearranged a little bit and let the media get set up. If you'd like to stay and attend the press conference, you are welcome to stay. Hold up your signs in the background. We'd love to have you. Again, you also have your cards that have the QR codes if you want to put and provide your comments both to the Department of State Hospitals and also on the portal at the District Attorney's website. Thank you again.